Hello, movie lovers. Welcome home. My name is Amy Henserling, and you are listening to Watch This List. This is my second episode of my new series, She Said, She Said, that I launched with Jetta a couple of weeks ago. Today we have the incomparable, wonderful Maddie Flowers on my podcast, making her debut. Maddie, hello. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling so excited to talk to you about movies. This has been on my calendar, like a big pink sticker on my planner for Friday that I've been looking forward to. It goes payday and then watch this list. So
and you like cleared the day. You cleared the day to chat with me for an hour.
Blocked out, do not disturb. I'm here. Yeah, I'm very excited to be here.
It's so exciting. And I have to say that I had in mind a little bit of a different direction originally, because I thought you and I were going to do something a little bit more or less horror-y. And then when I met you, you were like, no, that you love horror, and you actually wanted to do like Blair Witch Project. And so I was like, okay, this is definitely the direction that we're going in.
Yeah, I'm spooky.
Would you say that's your first love, horror?
Yeah, I think of I've been a movie lover my entire life. Obviously, horror is relatively new to me. I was a little scaredy cat growing up, but I've always been into spooky things, Halloween, and then it was really during the pandemic. I was like, I'm just gonna jump headfirst in, and I watched all of the greats for the first time, but now it's my number one.
What would you say was your entry point? Like what got you to where you were like, okay, I really, really like this?
Scream, I think
Really?
Scream was a good entry point because I don't know, like, because I grew up, I'm an elder millennial, so I was pretty little when Scream came out, but I was old enough to be like, I could go see it, and I was just too chicken, and I finally watched it, and it was like the perfect balance of funny, fun, and a little scary, and I was like, okay, I can do this.
Yeah. That one's a fun one also because you can tell that Craven is such a lover of the genre. Right. So there's just so many tropes and in-jokes that, I feel
but
like
he takes it so seriously. It's not like a joke. It's like,
right.
He has care for the genre. He has care for the story. So it's like, that perfect balance of, we're just having fun. But
there's like a reverence for it, I feel like.
Yeah.
It's kind of that, what's another example of this? Like Cabin in the Woods or.
Yeah. Yep. A lot of those where it's kind of, gosh, there has been like even like Barbarian or
I was about to say Barbarian.
Yeah. Where they know what they're doing and they're playing into the tropes of it all, but it's just also scary in a good movie. Or Malignant. Like that one was one where like so campy, but like full in, and I loved Malignant.
So did I. Yes. I don't know that that's really a popular opinion, but Malignant was awesome. Like, and I'm so glad that I saw it after I'd already seen Sisters by De Palma. And
I haven't.
Oh, you haven't, Maddie. That will make you appreciate Malignant even more.
Let me write it down.
Okay. It's like homage. Like, God. The whole thing of like, well, I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't seen Malignant, but the twist in it is very De Palma.
Okay, fun. Okay.
Yeah. You will enjoy that one.
Oh, yeah. I love Malignant because it was just so stupid, but so serious about it. Like,
it was also scary.
Yeah. It was shocking. That was one where my husband's like, why would you watch this? Like, why wouldn't you? It's fun.
Okay, what's the scariest movie you've ever seen? Actually, what has the what like shook you of the ones that you've seen?
I was pretty scared to watch Texas Chainsaw for the first time because I feel like that's kind of like a big like milestone that you have to get by, and I was pretty scared seeing that. Other than that, I feel like now I kind of know what I'm getting into, but like ghost ones scare me a lot.
Interesting.
So like The Ring kind of got me.
Yeah.
But Perfect Blue, not to get to this, but like stuff like that like freaks me out.
Have you seen Cure?
Yes.
Okay,
that one is so good.
That
or
gets
Pulse.
Or Pulse,
Have you seen Pulse? Yes.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Those two are like under the skin. I feel like that's where I get really frightened. And even Blair Witch Project to a certain extent, like what you can't see, ends up being a little more terrifying.
If you have you seen the movie Ghost Watch? This is like my favorite, like not so well known movie.
Yeah, that's the British one, right? Where they
Yes.
thought that it was like real and
Yeah.
it was fake, but the like everyone was panicking. No, I haven't. And the only reason I haven't is because I don't think I've like found a copy
Okay,
of it.
I'll hook you up with that. And also
Okay.
I feel like I have like 3 different like physical copies of it, so if I can't find it online, I'll just mail
You'll
it
just
to
mail
you.
it to me.
But
Okay.
that's another one that like you watch it and you're like, this is so boring. And then at the end you're like, this is the scariest thing I've ever seen.
Oh my gosh. Well, you
So
with ghosts, now that I know. Also, Maddie, I was thinking about this so Maddie chose Perfect Blue, and then my response to Perfect Blue was Someone's Watching Me by John Carpenter. But actually, when I was in the middle of it, I thought, oh, it would have been fun to do Audition with you.
oh, I know. I know. When we were watching these, I was like, there's so many.
I
Like when I was
know.
watching Someone's Watching Me, it was The Plumber, which I've texted you about, but there are
Right.
so many where it's like, you're crazy. Oh, what was it? I can't remember the name. It just came out a couple years ago. It has the girl from It Follows in it. I'll find the title for you.
Oh,
But it
yeah,
was like,
Maka.
yes, I don't know if it's called The Looker. I'm going to have to look it up
Yes,
for
I
you.
know
But
exactly what you're talking about. I haven't seen it, but I know what you're talking about. She's
yeah.
great, though. She has like one of the best screams.
Yes, and it's kind of like Someone's Watching Me, but scarier.
Ooh. I'll
And
have
in
to look.
like Eastern Europe or something. So it's very like straight, like she's in a strange place, even more so.
It wasn't The Watcher, was it? I think.
That's it.
Is
The
it?
Looker. Yeah, no, it's The Watcher.
Looker. The Looker makes me think of like The Overlook. That's why I was like,
Oh, yep. Nope, The
Yeah.
Watcher. Yeah.
The
So
Watcher.
we could do a whole series of girls who don't know what's going on and no one
Yes,
believes them.
I was about to say, and then we can contrast it with things like Audition, where she knows exactly what's going on and is terrifying.
Yeah. Have me on for part 2. I'll talk about Audition all day long.
Yeah, that's the one that I feel like it's so seminal in this vein. Like I can't really have like a she said series without bringing in an Audition eventually.
100%.
Okay, but we'll stick with what we've got. I think the horror conversation gets my brain fired up because I just think of there's so many, it's like I used to associate it so much with like a dude genre, where it's like only guys will enjoy horror and they seem to be obsessed, but there's like a whole.
Well, even like you look at the movies of the 70s and 80s, all the slashers are just boobs and naked girls and,
Yeah.
But then the whole final girl trope comes out of that. And I think it's been really fun, diving into the horror genre and finding my place in this like fandom of this type of movie that, no, there's a lot in here for girls to kind of either reclaim from those movies back then.
Right.
Or, find our spot in it. There's the whole, House of Psychotic Woman genre. There's a book about that. I think it's Kier La Janice was the author, and it's just a lot of movies that are in this kind of vein of like the horror of being a woman and how we're in society and how we would handle, a serial killer or a stalker or a scary guy in a mask. So yeah, I agree. Coming into it, I was like, this is a dude genre, but
yeah,
there's so much more to it.
And I kind of felt that way about Giallo when I first started getting into it. I thought like, oh, there's not going to be anything here for me. And then I ended up loving it. And it's a strange thing because a lot of it is so centered around, like you said, like slashers are weird men killing beautiful women. And there's like this like deeply ingrained psychological fear of women, trauma going on. But I think that there is something interesting, even as a female, to watch it and gain from it that isn't just demoralizing.
No, and I think maybe that's why Scream kind of spoke to me so much, because it was so clear that Wes Craven adored Sydney, Neve Campbell's character. Like, she wasn't there to be ogled at or exploited and part of, the thrill of horror movies. Like, he really, truly cared for Sydney, and that one's such an interesting franchise, is that she's the constant. There's always a ghost face, but it's always a different person. So kind of flipping that, so our final girl is the main character.
Right. That's a good point. And I wonder if there's a lot of female directors who do horror films. I mean, like I know the what's her name? Julie, the Raw director who
Oh,
did
yep.
she does a bunch of sort of horror. It's not really horror. It's more like body horror, I would say. But
Yeah. Titan and stuff.
yeah, oh my gosh. Don't even get me started.
I know finding more female women horror directors is definitely a long-standing hobby of mine. It's tough.
Really?
It's tough to find them, and I think, when you do, you have to be like, okay, even if you find one, it might not be a good movie. It's not guaranteed, but
Good point.
I think, with the new Candyman, that was I can't remember her name, but she was a female director from a
Mhm.
couple years ago. So there's a couple coming through, but
Yeah.
it's definitely, I mean, with any genre, it's a lot of guys
It is.
directing.
It's a lot of dudes. It's okay. It's okay.
They're still good movies.
We're still good movies. Okay, so we'll start with someone's watching me, exclamation
Cool.
point.
Yeah.
It's
And it's not somebody's watching me, which I keep calling it in my brain, or like
that's
the
what I
song.
keep I literally wrote down someone's watching me so that I would not so I wouldn't do somebody. Someone's watching me, which is a 1978 TV movie by none other than John Carpenter, who you called Papa John, which I love.
Yes, Grandpa John.
And you actually hadn't seen this one, even though you have seen a bunch of Carpenter, right?
Yes, honestly, really quick, personal story. When I started dating my husband, when he was my boyfriend, one of the very first movies he ever showed me was The Thing. Like, that's his favorite movie almost of all time. And that was my entry to John Carpenter. So that was like, okay, that was another moment of like, okay, I think I can do horror. If I can make it through The Thing, I think I could, like, quarter turn baby steps. So,
Yeah.
but I've seen Halloween, obviously, a lot of his other films like Escape from New York,
Yeah.
Big Trouble in Little China, but I've
more
never
fun ones.
Yeah. This one's always been on my list, but just never had a reason to kind of seek it out.
I saw it last year and I just loved it. And I had seen The Thing and I had seen The Fog, Assault on Precinct 13, and I already really did like him quite a lot as director. And but then Someone's Watching Me felt like the first one where it was like it felt empowering to watch it. And it's kind of like what you said about Craven with Sydney, where this Lee Michaels is very much has her own agency, I feel.
Yes, she's cared for. We're not just there to watch her run around and be scared. Like, we actually are invested in her, and you can tell that John Carpenter isn't just using her as a plot device of, damsel in distress. Like, can I swear in this?
Oh, go ahead.
She has her shit together. Like, she knows what she's doing. So it was very exciting to watch that.
And it's so fun too. Like, so the way that this movie set up is basically Rear Window, I would say.
Oh yeah.
Just kind of like unashamedly. But the way that the character is introduced is like she talks aloud to herself quite a lot. And so there's no voiceover narration. Instead, it's like it's this weird in-person voiceover where we get her innermost thoughts, but she's literally just talking to herself.
I know, and it makes her so endearing though, like immediately, because she's so like kind of goofy. What did she say that her mom says she's wacky or like
wacky?
Yeah, like, but it's just so real because like I talk to myself. I was like, full disclosure, I was winding yarn, like watching it because I knit, and I was like, "Oh, Madonna, you broke that," and then she was like, "Oh, Lee, you dummy!" Like, so she was like immediately like, "Okay, I love her." But yeah, it is very interesting. There was no narration, and watching this as such an early John Carpenter, he is so skilled at setting a mood, setting a scene that is just even for this made for TV movie, like he is so talented, and watching it, like you can see what he'll, become probably just a few weeks after that when he started filming Halloween. But just the way he can tell a story very like economically in this made for TV movie was really good for character building.
and it's so lean. Like it
Mhm.
starts right away.
Yeah.
Like you don't know who the killer is or the voyeur is, but like he's introduced right away as like, okay, this is what this person is capable of. This is what
Mhm.
they kind of get off on. And then Lee is like the new girl in New City, you know, looking for a job. She kind of reminds me, have you ever seen Broadcast News
No.
with Holly Hunter? Okay. She's kind of like a go-getter, you know,
Just
like,
show up and do it.
yeah, show up, get her hands dirty, start the job. But yeah, go ahead and set it up for us so that there's some context for people.
Yeah, so Lee is brand new to town. She works in, is it radio or broadcast?
Yeah,
Where
broadcast, like TV. She's like a
so
producer.
we meet her as she's moving in and buying her first beautiful apartment in LA with a beautiful window overseeing the whole area. And she goes to work. She makes friends immediately with the amazing Adrienne Barbeau, who I
Yes,
thought was very interesting that she's just an out lesbian and like that had nothing to do with anything.
I
But
know. Yes,
amazing. Thank you,
yeah.
Jen. She was so good. But almost immediately, like you said, Amy, she starts getting creepy phone calls from someone that can clearly see her and knows what she's doing. She
Mm-hmm.
starts getting letters in the mail from a place called Excursions Unlimited saying that she's won a free trip if she can guess it. And it becomes just more and more threatening, more and more creepy, where she slowly starts to unravel, as we all would, as she's getting these terrifying phone calls of, you know, describing what she's wearing, what talking about what she just did, and controlling her apartment with the lights. And then it all culminates at the end of her, you know, really taking control of the situation and figuring it out for herself.
But see, the thing that I find so interesting is that she doesn't move away.
No,
She doesn't try to sleep somewhere else.
no,
She is like very, very unusually brave.
yes.
I also love, I mean, I think this is part of the reason I love this movie so much is I love Paul. Um,
Mhm.
I love how they meet because she's basically hit on all the time and she's tired of it. And then when she sees this guy at a bar, she's the one who goes up to him and like basically asks him out and is like very forward about it. And he's just like, hello. But
Yeah.
he's also like very, I don't know. I love like the way that she and him are introduced to one another. I think John Carpenter, like, because he wrote it too, he just has this sense of like
Yeah.
what a woman, I don't know, like what a strong woman is, and that
Yeah.
he just never treats her as like even. I mean, I didn't even feel like she was in danger, even
It
though
was
she was.
it was very authentic with how she acted, and
Yeah,
it wasn't kind of like a caricature. And I think that's kind of interesting because from what I read, I think this is where he met Adrienne Barbeau, and then they went on to date and were together for a while. And you know, to
yeah,
me, she comes off as the same kind of vibe of, you know, strong personality, you know, does what she wants. But yeah, watching Lee kind of take the reins and just immediately go up to this guy. And what I really liked, and this isn't really a spoiler whatsoever, is that you never wonder if Paul's the one doing this. Like, he's never
exactly,
shown as a danger, which I thought was
exactly.
also refreshing because that could have been pretty easy to be like, was it him? Like, did he bug my apartment? But I thought that
Mm-hmm.
was like, it was just a sweet relationship where
Really, yeah,
he helped her out, but he didn't like take over. He didn't call her stupid. He believed her. But yeah, she was like, "No, this is where I live. I'm staying here. He's not going to scare me out of my own home."
yeah.
Which I
And
would
he
be
was
out.
so
I'd be gone.
respectful.
I would be
Yeah. Oh
gone.
no,
Amy,
I would
I
not be.
literally like that first call. I'd be like, "We are done." Like I would not be able to
I'm
handle
moving
that.
away.
No.
Well, or I'd want him to stay there, and
Yeah,
she's just like, nope, you can go. I mean, it's just it's so refreshing
I know.
to just see a character like that, and I feel like it's kind of a sad thing whenever like a man is decent in a movie where I'm like very very touched,
I
and
know.
I'm like
Like the
this
bare minimum.
the bare minimum really shouldn't feel this nice.
That he's not a stalker and that he lets her like do her own thing and he believes her when she's clearly like she doesn't look good like once you get through the movie, like she's not sleeping, she's stressed,
Right.
like, and she's like the most beautiful woman you've ever seen, and they put little like bags under her eyes, but like
Mm-hmm.
she's unhinged, and he's like, okay, like let me help you. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's bare minimum.
It it is, and it's sad that it's not just in horror movies either. This is like in any movie that I watch where if the man isn't trying to like control the situation or take over, or like you said, like he believes her.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many horror movies too that are like gaslighting and
Mm-hmm.
where you do suspect the lover, or you think like could this person be it? And yeah, with Paul, not at all,
Yeah.
like ever.
He was so cute. Little professor with psychology. Just he's like, I gotta go teach. Bye. Like, I'll go help
Yes.
you with the cops. And she's like, I tried. He's like, oh shoot. Like
Yeah,
he's just there.
that's the other thing too, is that like the cops are like, what do you want us to do? Unless you're being threatened,
I
we
know.
can't do anything, which is a whole other sort of like injustice in the world.
I
Like if you
know.
have somebody who's coming after you or making you feel weird, there's literally nothing that anybody can do. And that's a very real thing.
That's real. And that definitely, once we get into Perfect Blue, kind of ties into that with, this is so, it's from the 70s, but then you think fast forward to now with social media, with girls on Twitch, with, women on the internet, when you go to the police and be like, hey, this creepy stuff is happening. They're like, well, don't be on the internet, or like, we
Or
can't do
come back when
anything.
you're threatened.
Right.
Like,
It's just that kind of catch-22 of like, well, I don't want to get killed, but they're not going to take me seriously. Like, what did she say? Like, when I'm killed, you'll be the first to know, or
right.
something.
Yes. Like I'll come back when I'm dead.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just,
Yeah.
dang, it was like that in the 70s, and like, what, 50 years later almost? It's like, oh, yeah, that's about the same. And it kind of relates to, Perfect Blue once we get to that of, nowhere's safe. No one believes anybody when it comes to like threatening messages or stalkers.
Right. And you get the sense in this movie that like what he's doing is like trying to drive her to like he's not like a murderer himself necessarily. It's more that
Yes.
like he's trying to drive people crazy and then
Yes.
get them to do it.
Yeah, yeah, judging by when they do the fun, and I love procedurals when they're like digging into like the records of like
I
who he
know.
is and like the past
Yeah.
tenants of the apartment. I was like, yes, let's do it. But I was like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, shoot, he doesn't do anything like
Right.
physically to these women, but has a very specific intent in mind at the end of the day.
Right. It's a very psychological thriller
Control, yeah.
control. Yeah, that's why I thought to pair it with Perfect Blue. So actually, this is a great segue. So Perfect Blue is Satoshi Kon from 1997. Maddie, when did you see this movie? Because you are like, I would describe you as like a mega fan. Like
Yes, oh my god.
you have reviewed it and like multiple times logged it. So
Yes.
tell me where the genesis of this was for you.
It was another one where I honestly hadn't really heard of it, and for like ever. I watched it, I think it was like 2020 or 2021 when it was on the
Mm-hmm.
Criterion channel, but I've been kind of an anime fan my whole life. I've been always into that culture, but it's like Sailor Moon or Evangelion, just very classic, like just
Yeah.
anime, like straightforward stuff that everyone knows. And it's probably Letterboxd's fault that I found about it, seeing lists and like, oh, if you like this movie, you'll like this movie. And so I think it was just a Friday during the early pandemic when there was nothing else to do, and I put it on, and it just like every single little part of it is like perfectly in my interest level. Like, I love anime, I love Japan, I love pop stars, I love psychological thrillers, I love the early internet as like a concept, I love, cute stuff mixed with scary stuff. And so it's just kind
It's
of
just a perfect
a
blend.
perfect blue blend for
Perfect blue
Maddie's
blend.
silly brain. And so yeah, I watched it, immediately loved it, and was just like blown away. And it's so funny because like I try to listen to a few podcasts about it, over the years, and it's just been so annoying of people being like, I thought cartoons were for kids, but this is scary. And like, okay, if you have a movie podcast, that's the dumbest opinion to have. I'm sorry. But
Yeah.
just when do you finally get to people that like understand it and like it? Like just that feeling of like this is such a gut punch of a movie mixed with
Mhm.
like incredible like artistry. Like
Yeah.
it's another one where I don't want to say he's as cared like Satoshi Kon cares for Mima as much as John Carpenter cares for Lee, because Mima we do see in some pretty um, sketchy situations.
Compromising
Yes.
situations.
And I did
Yeah.
hear that Satoshi Kon said he did not realize so many people would see this and like it, and he regrets going as far as he did in some of those scenes to be as explicit, which
Mhm.
I don't know if he means that just like morally or if he just means it so it can be more, viewable by the general public, but it's just it's a special secret gem, I think. And I was so lucky. There's a theater in Minneapolis called the Trilon Theater that plays a lot of, old movies, cool movies, and they played Perfect Blue within the last couple of years. And seeing it on the big screen in a room full of strangers was an experience, Amy. I will tell you that much. It was I'm not a very shy person, so like before the movie, I went by myself and I was talking to people by me. I'm like, "Have you ever seen it?" They're like, "No, I've never seen it." And I was like,
Oh,
"Okay, have fun."
buckle up.
Like it'll be good. And just hearing the audience, at the beginning, like Mima's so cute and they're setting up her computer. She's like, "What's the internet?" And like she doesn't know how to use like a web browser and stuff, and people are laughing because it's so dated and silly. And then within like half an hour, just like silence. Like you could hear a pin
Yeah.
drop in the theater.
Yeah.
And I'm just like watching it
It
like a
it
little creep.
it just goes hard. Like
Mm-hmm.
I saw it several years ago after I saw Paprika.
Mm.
I still haven't seen Millennium Actress, but
Mm-hmm.
that's one that's been on my watch list for a while. But I loved Paprika, oddly. And then my friend Craig was like, "You have to see Perfect Blue," and it was like his favorite movie of all time, and like he'd just seen it so many times.
Shout
So
out Craig.
yeah, Craig
We love
he's a cool
Craig.
dude. So we watched it together, I remember, and I was just like amazed at the how it could convey so much intensity in the format. And I
Yes.
was not an anime person at that time. I hadn't really had much exposure. It's kind of like I mean, I know this is a popular one, but Death Note and Bebop,
Mm.
like where
Mm-hmm.
you're getting into quite dark territory, and I didn't really know that it could do that. Like I didn't.
Yeah.
So it really, and then even on this rewatch, Maddie, I was like, this is a lot.
I know when I rewatched
Um,
it, I was like, "Oh no!" Like I forgot. I should
yeah.
should I have like asked you any like, is there limitations of movies that you do or do not like to watch?
Oh no.
Spoilers for people that have not seen it. We won't give away the story, but you see rape scenes. Like it's very
Mm-hmm.
explicit. You see a lot of nudity. Like it's intense. There is that scene where she is so kind of going back, the plot of Perfect Blue is
Yeah.
this girl Mima, she is in a pop star called Cham, which is just like a classic J-pop group, like idols back in the 90s, and she decides she wants to be a famous actress. She wants to kind of move out of the pop idol persona and become a more serious actress. So she's in this, I think it's a TV drama, or I think it's a TV show, but
Yeah.
she
Like
gets
a soap almost, but
yes,
it's
yep,
like a
true crime soap type
true
of
crime.
thing.
Yeah.
And she just kind of gets pushed further and further into doing things that she doesn't want to maybe do quite yet as an actress. And one of them is to be in a rape scene in this TV show. And the scene where it shows us in the movie filming, which I do think is kind of the catalyst of her mental breakdown, is
Right.
it's pretty nuts watching them take different takes of it, and they have to pause to move the camera while the guy's on top of her and she kind of disassociates, and
Yeah.
then after that she kind of loses touch with all reality around her, and that's the movie of her kind of coming to grips with who she is, not only just like, who am I, Mima? Do I want to be an actress? But literally, like, who am I? I'm lost in the world, like losing her mind, and what's real, what's filming, what's fake, what's a dream. Are my fish alive? Are my fish dead?
like there's a lot about illusions too.
Yes.
And like, what are you also, okay, so there's the illusion angle, but then there's also that she finds this blog where
Yes.
someone is pretending to be her,
Yes.
but is also clearly watching her
Yes.
and stalking her because they couldn't write it in the way, like it'd be like I put my right foot in front of my left foot when I
Yeah.
was getting off the train.
Yeah, this
Sort
is
of.
my favorite brand of milk, and I bought it yesterday at the store. And Mima's like,
And she did. And so she's like reading. It'd be like, I mean, someone who has like a live diary of your life
Yes.
that you aren't writing and you don't know who it is. And then you're like
But did
becoming
I
aware
write
of
it?
yourself.
Yeah, it's like
through
if there was
right.
like an Amy Twitter, they're like, "Oh, I had to drive home to get on this podcast, and I put my blue shirt on because we're watching Perfect Blue." And then you're
Right.
like, "Wait, did I write that? Because I could have, but I didn't. But how did they know?" Like, ugh. And
Yeah. And then the movie very brilliantly weaves in and out of this TV show that she's in.
mhm.
So like when a scene starts, you don't actually know if it's actually happening or it, and like, because it'll come out and then you see a TV screen and you're like, oh my gosh, they're doing a scene.
Yeah, it's like the most like it was all a dream type of situations in a movie, like in
meta.
Succession, but it works. It's not corny. It's not like every time you as a viewer become just more and more disoriented, be like, is Mima doing these things? Is like when like the violence and there's murders coming, like, do we believe her? Like, just unreliable narrative to the point where you're questioning yourself too when you're watching it. Like, what am I?
Exactly.
Like, who do I think? Am I following it? Just but it's just so, like you said, it's just so expertly done where it's just, it throws you off at the most perfect times and then immediately just throws you into another situation, like as you're still getting your bearings.
Right. And then it's also like she'll just like wake up in bed and you're like,
Yeah.
where was she? So in both films, you're really looking at it completely from the point of view of the woman. But I think I would say in Perfect Blue, I don't know if you agree. Do you feel like what level of agency do you feel like she actually has?
I do not believe she has any agency until kind of the climax of the movie when she confronts the man who's writing this blog of hers, where like the illusion becomes reality, where she sees him at the studio and it starts kind of clicking into place. I think up until then, her agency is gone. That middle part from the rape scene in the TV show she's filming to the attack from the blog writer, Me Mania, who is like, if you say, draw a picture of a creepy guy on the internet, like is what you would picture. That. Like,
yeah.
So I think in that middle section, just none. Like, I don't think there's any agency there whatsoever, because you can see, she agrees to things that she's like, oh, totally, I'll do a rape scene. It's fine. And then she comes home and just breaks down and says like, of course I didn't want to do that. So she doesn't have agency in the real world with her decisions, but then mentally it's that feeling of paranoia that she doesn't know what to believe. She doesn't know who to go to. There's no one to talk to the point where she can't even believe her own mind.
Right. And then the distinction between like the acting and the script and like what she's doing is like bleeding into her own like inability to read herself. And then she's also got this, like, what would you describe, like an alter ego coming at her and talking to her?
Yeah, the dream Mima or something, where she's like the little fairy creepy the mean Mima where she shows up, she's like, you're dumb, and then just like kind of flies away and like taunts her and kind of, shows up in situations where Mima questions like, am I doing that? Like, you see fake Mima performing at a channel event, or you see fake Mima
on the radio.
Yeah, and then real Mima shows up, and it's just it's really interesting. Like you said, the TV show mirrors it, and especially with the title of the TV show she's filming is Double Bind, is just like she's in a double bind, like it's all double.
Right. Do you feel like any of this is directly relatable in the sense of like, I mean, I'm thinking obviously movies we love, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's like the surface level, which is like the technical part and the acting or the performances, the story, the score, the cinematography, but then underneath it all, I feel like you can't really love a film that you don't feel like personally. So how would you describe your relationship to Perfect Blue in terms of how it makes you feel or what it makes you think about yourself?
I think that's a really good question, Amy. But
I try.
just like the different yous that you present, the you at work is different than the you in front of your family, is different than the you when you're all by yourself, and just kind of coming to terms with how much am I performing? Who is the real me? Is it an amalgamation of all of the me's I perform? You know what I mean? And just kind of coming to grips of like, how do I want to be perceived? Does that matter? How do I want to perceive myself? And as a woman, I feel like there's a lot of different ways that you need to present yourself in different situations. And watching Mima try to kind of just like shoehorn herself into these situations where even if it doesn't feel correct quite yet, where she's like, I know I want to be an actress, but then every single moment she has to be like, yeah, I'll do that, or yeah, that seems right, or like, oh, I miss my friends when I was in that pop group, and just coming to grips with like, what is the identity I truly want and what's the actual reality of my identity. And I think as you grow, especially as a little girl, and even like me, I'm like, I love horror, but I'm cute. And like, do you need to have those different identities, or can you just be you? And what's the real version?
And how much of it is what I wonder too is like, I like how you described that the rape scene was that she went into it thinking that she wanted to do it for the show. It's obviously manufactured. Like we are even aware that it's not really happening, but it feels very much like it is.
Oh yeah, the guy even apologizes when they have to like freeze to move the camera. He's like, I'm so sorry. She's like, I'm
so sorry.
Like,
yeah. And even when it takes you out of that moment, you still actually feel violated or like that she's being violated, even though she's consenting to the situation.
Yeah.
But that made me think, like, you're talking about all these different personas in life, right? I wonder how much of them are reactive as opposed to proactive. Like, how much of you even saying, like, how you're presenting yourself with me, how much is that like an expectation that you feel like as a girl who loves horror, as a girl who loves anime, how much of that is like what part of it is like how you want to portray it, or how it'd be best received?
And that's 100% what I was trying to get at, but you were just so much more eloquent. But I've, when you go to like at work, I have to be in these meetings and I hear myself talk and I'm almost like, who is that? Like,
right.
Like, but it comes naturally. So you're like, of course that is like a fraction of my true identity, but it is very also a reactive knowing how I need to act in these certain situations. And I think that's what's really scary about Perfect Blue, is kind of watching her lose all control of how she's presented. Like, you see her acting in the show later on, and then she doesn't realize she's acting. Like, so she's not sure who she's presenting. It kind of is just like all out of whack, like just jumbled up. Or what the end of shooting when she calls her coworker like by the character's name, like she's just,
yes,
and her coworker's like, you don't have to call me that, like, you weirdo.
Yeah, and then when we get to the very end and she finds out who it was the whole time, that's a great twist. But then also how she decides to deal with it is very interesting to me.
Yeah,
because it's not really an vengeful spirit. She's actually quite compassionate.
Yeah, and that's where I think kind of that's when, not to be cheesy, like she has snapped back to reality. And when she sees that happen, I think that's the real Mima being like, oh shit, like this is terrifying, but I'm not vengeful. I don't want to, I just want to survive and help people that I care about, type of thing. And I think that's what's so fun that little line, and I was gonna look up what the actual translation, but at the end when she's like, "No, it's the real me," like, is it Viva? Like, what are you talking about? I love the end of that, and it ends on like that pop song, and like the
I
lights
know.
all come out. But I think watching that, because I watched that first, and then I watched Someone's Watching Me, and I think it's just such a good example of Lee always had agency. Lee,
Yes.
and that was such a perfect example of, okay, in both of these situations, they could go one of the other way. You could either lose it and no one is there to help you and support you and you just lose your mind, or you have a group of, your lesbian friend and your cute boyfriend being like, all right, we trust you, let's figure this out. And then you take control of it. And it's just such an interesting way to see how two different women would handle such a situation when presented with a creepy stalker or someone trying to just mess up your life.
Drive them insane
Yeah.
or just question reality. And when like the cops start to not believe her, and like, when she says about Sophie, that's like, I heard what I heard,
Yeah.
and like they're making her feel like she's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I think in Lee's case, because it's a different kind of movie, she's not in the space of like, did it happen?
Yeah.
Whereas I think Mima is in that space of like, what did I do?
Yeah.
But it still is sort of like this male attempt to sabotage or
Mm-hmm.
confuse the situation, whatever the motive is. They're different motives, but it's still that sort of sense of like,
Right.
how do you hold on to yourself?
Well, and then even in Mima's case, the stalker is a guy, but other than that, it's kind of her own brain until you pull out, be like, okay, what is driving all of these decisions? The audience of that pop group, what would you say the makeup of like the demographic of who is in that audience?
Oh, right. Men.
Right. Who's
Yeah.
reading the magazines about Mima? Who's talking about Mima's new TV show and judging her? She's doing
Great
this
point.
all for her, like probably 99.9% male audience and making these decisions based on that. So it's also kind of a, the cops don't believe Lee and trying to figure out how to get through that. But then with Mima, the male audience doesn't know if that's Mima or not writing the blog, and doesn't matter at that point. It's just all presenting her identity to that audience and trying to kind of come to grips with that.
That's actually a great insight as to like, does it even matter really to fans?
No.
If what they're seeing is the real person?
No.
As long as it's like pleasurable.
No, and I think that's just another kind of what I love about the movie is it makes you think of like, okay, in our society, like poor Britney Spears, poor Lindsay Lohan, poor like these female, child stars that are just put out there to make these decisions and then kind of just go off the rails for a little bit. And some of them are very lucky to kind of be able to handle it if they have the right support, but fans don't care. Fans are rabid, like, and it's gotten worse now in my opinion, but it's just like it's such a good little like snapshot of like, oh god, being famous sucks. Like I would never want to be famous.
Well, and also I wonder, do you think that this is even gender specific? Like, do you think that because I feel like we all do this to a certain extent.
Yeah. Oh yeah, 100%.
And like maybe it's not because like we could idolize. I mean, I know a lot of like Taylor Swift fans and like
be careful, Amy.
I don't know where Maddy stands on this, but I'm getting an inkling. Okay. So, but I mean, like that's an example of where there Taylor Swift is a good example of where in my view, people can get very obsessed with her because they girls feel like she is authentic.
Yes.
And that she is actually relatable.
Yes. Yep.
And that is sort of the genius of her strategy, right?
Yes.
Is to come across as like she's a billionaire, but she comes across as like girl next door.
Yep, she's just one of the girls. She gets it. She likes what you like. She loves her cat. She likes little handwritten secrets and her stuff. Yeah, I am not a Swiftie, but I totally understand how you would be.
The draw.
Yes.
Right. But that's its own sort of like persona obsession where it is like you could have the one end where we don't care who you really are as long as who you project is pleasing to us.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the other end where you're like obsessed with knowing, like you feel like this is like a kindred spirit and that
Mm-hmm.
you're seeing the real person. And then you become enamored with that, which could equally be the same level of projection,
Yeah.
like manufactured.
Yeah, I don't think that's gender specific at all.
Right.
I think that's just kind of one, our parasocial relationships with celebrity and with famous people, and especially how that's evolved. But I think it's just human condition, like that
Yeah.
manufacturing authenticity, like the whole like puzzle of it, and it's just a little cartoon. Just when people are like, I didn't realize cartoons can be for grown-ups. Like it makes you think about all these different like. It's scary, but
Layers.
yeah. So, as you watch Perfect Blue, were you scared?
I was, and it's quite like it's dark, and then it's also disturbing in the way that I feel like is still relevant
Yeah.
even though it's from the 90s like you said, and that it ends up being a woman who's betraying her, I think
Mhm.
is very I hate to bring a black swan, but I have to at least once, where it's like the same, where it's not just like that you have to deal with you being against you, but the idea of like other women being against you, or that you're in
Mhm.
competition with other women all the time. And whether it's for male attention or validation, or it's just for your own place,
Mhm.
that you're trying to establish yourself. This movie made me think of like the fear, not just that men have of women, maybe, but that
Yeah.
we have of each other.
Yeah, I
Um,
think that's a huge layer to it, Amy. I 100% agree with, you know, Rumi when she's in that situation. It's that fear of aging. It's a fear of losing your identity. It's a fear
right,
of who you used to be and competition coming up. And all of a sudden you're like, well, if I am not cute and fun and little and exciting anymore and you're thrown away for the next thing, like who are you, what are you good
right.
for? And so that's one of those things where how Mima isn't vengeful at all. It's because it is sad, like Rumi is facing her own like mental breakdown, like losing her own sense of self, and obviously she handled it poorly, but Mima had that sympathy because Mima probably could see herself in that same situation in
Becoming,
a couple decades.
yeah. And that's something that like a lot of actresses, Julianne Moore just came to my mind in
Yeah.
particular, where the older that they get, they're like, we're just sort of discarded,
Yes.
or the roles that we're given are only very, very specific
Mhm.
to that we are aging or that we have aged. And it isn't really the same for like men who
Right.
are older.
Yeah.
Like every older man role does not have to call attention to the fact
He's
that
old.
he
Yeah.
is older.
Yeah. It's not, yeah, like I think Meryl Streep's like, now I'm just getting to be like grandmas and witches. Like, it just the types of roles, but you look at, yeah, any like Harrison Ford or somebody like that, like it's not like there's grandpa, like he still gets to
No,
be
he's still
Indiana
Indiana
Jones.
Jones.
So yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah. And it's hard to be, I was just going to ask you, but there's like two parts to this. So there's the question of like, how do we as women portray ourselves authentically that is in line with who we are, without catering to expectation? But then also like, how do we sort of age gracefully? Like the in a way that isn't just like, well, if people aren't attracted to me anymore, they won't listen to me anymore, because that's sort of a real fear at the heart of
I
everything.
know. It's terrifying. It's something, you go back and forth on because I try to, think of I'm lucky to get older. Not everyone gets to get older. But then you walk through like the mall and be like, wow, I'm old as hell. And I'm like, I'm not even old. And just kind of like coming to grips with it, I think internally first is like, I think that's more than we can unpack in our little movie podcast episode of how women deal with
True.
our place in society, but just
True.
I don't know, just kind of modeling it for ourselves, pushing back against it. Like when I feel those things, like there's sweet girls at work. I work with these like Gen Z girls, like, oh, Madonna, I didn't realize you were so old. You're so cool. I was like, I'm not like, thank you,
But
I'm not that old.
like,
Like, I'm in my 30s. Like, so just kind of, but then be like, okay, how did that make me feel? Why did it make me feel like that? Like, thinking of it neutrally, like, it's not good or bad, but then kind of, how do I model to younger girls to be like, it's fine. You can still be yourself, like, as you get older, just because you're not as, like, 21-year-old desirable little girl out in the world. Like, you still can be you. You still get to have your own personality. You don't have to like fit into that mold of like, okay, now I'm in my late 30s, so I'm going to cut my hair the way that like moms do and just go to like
right.
baking class and just sit at home and watch, and if you want to do that, that's totally fine. But like, you don't have to fit yourself into specific molds just because you have to. Or society
I think
says
it all
you have to.
It comes down to just like finding your own voice and having comfortability in that. And I think that the more that you're able to sort of like grasp onto what you feel your purpose is or what you feel like you're here to do.
Yeah.
I feel like that sort of people pleasing goes away more readily. Like you don't have to cling to it to be able to express yourself anymore. But it is a challenge for sure.
Tough.
Yeah.
That's tough, Amy.
I know. I try to have deep thoughts with Maddie Flowers.
Love it.
Trying to end with deep thoughts here. So, Someone's Watching Me by JC, Perfect Blue by Khan. Very different films, but I felt like complemented each other in sort of the surfacey stalker way, but then also just like inspiring you to take care of things yourself and not just like depend on someone to come and save you.
Yeah. And to trust yourself at the end of the day. I think that's kind of what's prevailing at both of those movies, to be like, I know this is happening. And, Mima has to go through hell to kind of get to that point. And Lee is lucky enough where she has that agency right away, but they both struggle. It's not easy for Lee just because she has more agency and more confidence in herself, but
right.
Just, it's hard to be a girl sometimes, but it's fun too. But yeah, Satoshi Kon's Perfect Blue. Be careful when you watch it. There's some intense stuff, but well worth it.
It's well worth it, and it's an excellent entry point, like we were talking about with Scream. I think if you are not used to seeing movies like this, it's a great way to start.
Because it's also just, it sounds really weird to say, it's really fun to watch. Like, it's beautiful. The music is amazing. Seeing it in the theater, like the music, watching that in the theater, it was amazing. Like the pizza delivery scene and the music is pounding and like the lights are flashing, and that part where you see Mima, but then she's on TV and like the projection of her TV self is reflecting over her. She like, just the different layers of that. That's one where like I was holding my breath watching it. It is just, it's an intense movie, but it's also like just really fun to watch on like a base level.
Yeah. And it touches on so many things that I think that the more that you rewatch it and sort of know what's happening, it's going to hit you differently, like most good movies do. So it was a pleasure to rewatch. Pleasure to have you on, Maddie.
I hope I can come back at some point. I loved this. I love talking with you about movies. It's a lot to come.
It's wonderful. And everybody follow her. She is Corndog Maddie on Letterboxd. And we'll see you at the movies.